I thought I was in some sort of romantic experiment. Turns out I was being trained like a dog. When I first met Adam, I honestly thought I had hit the jackpot. We met at a mutual friend's party. He was quiet, clean-cut, and there was this calm confidence about him that drew me in immediately. I was 26, working as a graphic designer, trying to figure my life out. Adam was 31, a software engineer. He felt so stable. The first month of dating was a dream. Flowers at my doorstep. Sweet texts first thing in the morning. We had those deep late-night conversations where you feel like the whole world shrinks down to just the two of you. But then, slowly, things started feeling off. It began with little tests. That's what he called them. One night, about 2 months in, we were supposed to meet up for dinner. I texted him, "Hey, running 10 minutes late, sorry." He didn't respond. When I showed up, he wasn't there. I waited almost an hour before calling him. He picked up, sounding completely calm. "I was waiting to see if you'd show up anyway," he said. I remember laughing awkwardly, not sure what he meant. "Little love test," he told me later. "Wanted to see if you cared enough to wait." First, I brushed it off. People have quirks, right? The tests kept happening. Sometimes he'd ignore my texts for hours just to see if I'd double-text him. Once he introduced me to a female coworker and later confessed it was a setup to see if I'd get jealous. By month 4, I was constantly second-guessing myself. Was I overreacting? Was this just part of being in a relationship? Then there was the night that changed everything. It was a Friday. I was exhausted from work and looking forward to a quiet night with Adam. When I got to his apartment, he wasn't there. The door was unlocked, though, so I let myself in. Sitting on the coffee table was a single red envelope with my name on it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It said, "If you love me, clean the kitchen. I'll know if you did it." I wish I could say I walked out right then. But I didn't. I stood there frozen, holding the note. Felt like my brain split in two. One part of me was screaming, "What the hell is this?" The other part didn't want to disappoint him. I cleaned the entire kitchen. When Adam came back 2 hours later, he smiled like I'd passed some invisible exam. Kissed me on the forehead. Whispered, "Good girl." That night, lying next to him in bed, my stomach twisted in knots. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I finally confided in my best friend Lena. When I told her everything, she went pale. "Honey, that's not love testing," Lena said. "That's control." I remember laughing it off. But deep down, I knew she was right. The realization fully hit me a week later. Adam had this habit of asking me to do things, phrasing them like dares. "Don't wear makeup today. I want to see you natural. Give me your phone for an hour. No looking at it. Cancel your plans tonight. I need you." Always framed like some kind of game or trust-building exercise. But it wasn't a game. One night, I was scrolling Instagram and stumbled on a post from a psychology page Lena followed. It was titled, "Signs of Coercive Control in Relationships." Every bullet point felt like someone had followed me around with a camera, setting little traps to see if you'll disobey, slowly isolating you from friends, framing obedience as proof of love. Obedience. That word hit me like a slap. That's when everything clicked. Adam wasn't testing my love. He was training me. Just like you train a dog. The twist I didn't expect came from someone completely outside of our bubble. Adam's ex-girlfriend. Her name was Melissa. She messaged me out of nowhere one night on Facebook. "Hi, I know this is random, but are you dating Adam right now?" My heart nearly stopped. I typed back, "Yes." "Why?" Her reply was like being doused with cold water. "I dated him for 3 years. Think you should know. He does this thing where he tests you constantly. It doesn't stop. It gets worse." My fingers shook as I read her next messages. She sent screenshots of texts from Adam that were almost word for word identical to things he'd said to me. Little dares. Little notes. The same patterns. I wasn't special. I wasn't his girlfriend. I was his project. That night, I packed up everything I'd ever left at Adam's apartment. Left him a single note of my own. "You failed my test." I never looked back. But the story doesn't end there. About 3 months later, I got another message from Melissa. Apparently there was someone else. A new girl. The cycle had already started again. And the worst part? When I went back and looked at our early texts way back from the first few weeks, there were already signs. Subtle wording. Questions that felt innocent but weren't. Things like, would you ever let someone tell you what to wear? Looking back now, it feels so obvious. But when you're inside it, just feels like love. It wasn't until I got out that I understood. Real love doesn't need obedience. Real love isn't a test. The days after I left Adam felt hollow. Like I'd just woken up from a dream I wasn't fully aware I'd been trapped in. People always imagine breakups as fiery fights, shouting matches, throwing plates. But this wasn't that. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. The silence felt dangerous in a way. I kept checking my phone, half expecting him to text, to call, to show up at my door furious or begging. But nothing. The absence made me second-guess myself again. Was I overreacting? I found myself rereading our old messages, staring at photos of us on vacations. I even caught myself smiling at the good ones before quickly shutting my phone off, disgusted with myself. Then one morning, Lena showed up at my apartment unannounced. She knocked 3 times, sharp and deliberate, like she already knew I wouldn't answer on the first try. When I opened the door, she was holding 2 iced coffees. Figured you'd forget to feed yourself, she said, shoving one into my hand. She wasn't wrong. We sat on my couch in silence for a while, sipping our drinks. Finally, I asked, did I make it all up? Lena's eyes flashed with that look only best friends can give, the one that says, are you kidding me right now? No, she said firmly. You didn't. That man was grooming you. That word again. Grooming. Felt so heavy, but right. That afternoon, Lena convinced me to start therapy. I'll be honest, I wasn't thrilled. The idea of sitting across from a stranger and unloading my mess felt exhausting. But I knew I couldn't handle this alone. The first session was rough. My therapist, a woman named Dr. Farah, was patient but direct. She asked things like, when did you first feel like you were losing control in the relationship? And how did Adam frame his requests to you? I told her everything. The notes. The dares. Melissa's messages. And then, about halfway through, Dr. Farah said something that stuck with me. Coercive control isn't about love. It's about power dressed up as romance. That line echoed in my head for weeks. I started reading more. Articles, books, survivor stories. It was like pulling back a curtain and realizing there was an entire world I hadn't seen before. But I wasn't just reading for myself. I kept thinking about the new girl. The one Melissa had mentioned. Part of me wanted to find her, warn her, tell her it wasn't her fault, that she wasn't crazy. I debated for days. What if she thought I was just bitter? What if I made things worse? Eventually, I decided to send a single message. Her name was Emily. Melissa had found her on Instagram. Her profile was mostly selfies and brunch pics, nothing unusual. But there were a few photos with Adam. The captions made my stomach twist. So lucky to have found this one. Best boyfriend ever. I typed out my message carefully, trying to strike the right tone. Hi Emily. I know you don't know me and I'm really sorry to reach out like this, but I dated Adam before you. I just wanted to say please be careful. If you ever feel like things aren't right, trust your gut. Then I waited. Hours passed. Then a full day. Finally, Emily replied. At first it was just, who is this? I explained. Told her I wasn't trying to cause drama, just to give her a heads up. And then slowly she opened up. She said Adam had already started doing things that felt a little weird. Little challenges. Asking her to skip nights out with friends. Making her prove how much she cared. I felt sick reading it. Emily wasn't angry. She was scared. We messaged back and forth for days. I shared my story. Melissa's too. Eventually, Emily made the same choice I had. She left him. That moment felt like redemption. Closure, maybe. But it didn't stop there. One night, about 2 months after that, Melissa, Emily, and I met up in person. It was surreal, 3 women, all linked by the same man, sitting in a downtown coffee shop like old friends. We talked for hours, shared notes, laughed a little, cried a lot. At one point, Melissa pulled out her phone and showed us a folder full of screenshots and messages from her time with Adam. That's when I realized I needed to start saving things, she said. Just in case. It hit me then. How many other women were out there? How many more projects did Adam have? Melissa suggested starting a group of support space for women who'd been through something similar. That idea stuck with me. A few weeks later, I made a private Facebook group called Love Isn't a Test. First, it was just the three of us. But slowly word spread. Friends added friends. Stories poured in. Women who'd been manipulated, controlled, trained like pets under the guise of love. Reading their posts, it was like watching my own story unfold in different versions. One woman shared how her boyfriend made her keep a journal of everything she did, framing it as relationship mindfulness. Another said her partner would randomly change the Wi-Fi password until she earned it back. Different methods. Same sick control. The group grew to over 500 members in just a few months. It wasn't just about venting. It became a resource. People shared articles, therapy recommendations, hotline numbers. One post in particular hit me harder than any of the others. A woman named Jules wrote, "I spent 2 years trying to pass his tests. Then I realized I'd been failing myself the whole time." That line stayed with me. I wasn't just healing for me anymore. I was healing for all of us. There was one final thread to tie off. Adam himself. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since the night I left the note. Part of me wanted to forget he existed. But another part couldn't. Not while he was still out there repeating the same cycle. So I made a choice. I wrote my story. Every detail. And I posted it publicly. Not on my personal page in a larger relationship advice forum. I didn't use Adam's full name, but I included enough detail that anyone in our city, in our circles, might recognize the pattern. I didn't expect much. But the post blew up. Hundreds of comments. Thousands of shares. People resonated with it. Some said they'd been through something similar. Others just expressed shock that things like this happened in real life. I'll never forget the message I got from a stranger a week after the post went live. Her name was Chloe. She said, "I think I just avoided the same trap because of your story. Thank you." That was it. That was everything. In the end, it wasn't about Adam. It was about all the women like me, like Melissa, like Emily, like Chloe, who needed someone to say, "You're not crazy. You're not weak. You don't deserve this." Real love isn't obedience training. Real love is freedom. That's what I hold on to now. That's what keeps me going. Because no matter how many tests he set up, I passed the only one that mattered. I saved myself. And I'll keep helping others do the same. For the first time in over a year, I could walk past the street where Adam's apartment was without feeling like my lungs were closing up. Sounds like such a small thing. But when you've spent months being conditioned, yes, conditioned to tie love with control, even walking down a familiar block feels like reclaiming a part of yourself. By now, the group we created, Love Isn't a Test, had grown into something bigger than just a private Facebook group. Melissa and Emily pushed me to take it further. "Why don't we do a podcast?" Melissa suggested one night while we were sitting on my balcony. "A podcast?" I repeated, both curious and scared at the same time. "You tell stories better than anyone I know," Emily added. "You could help so many people." The idea sat in the back of my head for weeks. I kept picturing my voice, out there for strangers to hear. The vulnerability made me nauseous. But then I thought about Chloe's message. If telling my story helped even one more woman avoid what I went through, wasn't it worth it? So I said yes. We started small. Just me, Melissa, and Emily sitting around a cheap microphone in my living room. The first episode was raw. I didn't script anything. I just talked. About the first night Adam left me waiting at dinner. About the note on the coffee table. About the phrase, "good girl." And how at the time it made me feel loved instead of trapped. We uploaded it on a whim. And again the response was overwhelming. Women sent in voice messages, emails, DMs. Some were long stories. Some were just one sentence. One woman wrote, "I didn't even know this had a name until I heard your voice." That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about romantic relationships. The pattern showed up everywhere. Families. Friendships. Workplaces. Control disguised as love wasn't just an Adam problem. It was bigger than that. By episode 5 we had professional mics. By episode 10 we had sponsors. But it never stopped feeling personal. And then, One night, after recording an episode about love bombing, I got an email. The subject line was just, "I'm sorry." My heart sank. Clicked it open. It was from Adam. He wrote, "I've been listening. I didn't know I was hurting you. I thought it was normal. I thought I was just protecting myself. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to write back. To say something. Anything. But in the end I closed the email. Some apologies aren't for you. They're for the person giving them. And I didn't need his words to heal anymore. Weeks went by. Then months. We kept growing the podcast. I kept going to therapy. Slowly, the knot in my chest that had once felt permanent started to unravel. One Saturday morning as I was setting up for a live Q&A episode, Lena called. I hadn't talked to her in a few weeks. Life had gotten busy. "Guess where I'm standing right now?" she said, her voice echoing slightly like she was outside. "Where?" I asked. "Your old coffee shop. The one near Adam's apartment." I smiled, feeling a wave of nostalgia and relief all at once. "That place," I said, shaking my head. "I can't believe how different everything feels now." Lena paused. "You really got out," she said softly. "And you helped other people get out too." Her words made my throat tighten. It was true. And as much as I hated what I'd gone through, I couldn't deny that it had shaped me. Before Adam, I'd always been the kind of person who doubted herself, who stayed quiet when things felt wrong, who said yes when she meant no. Now I was someone else. Someone stronger. That night, I sat down with my journal habit. Dr. Farah had encouraged me to pick up and wrote a letter to my past self. Here's what I wrote. "Dear me, you're not weak. You're not stupid. You're not dramatic. You are human. And humans make mistakes when they want to be loved. But love isn't about tests. It isn't about notes left on coffee tables. It isn't about ignoring your text to see how many times you'll message back. Love is quiet. Love is kind. Love lets you breathe. You got out. And that means you're already stronger than you know. Keep going. With love, future you." I closed the journal with a kind of peace I hadn't felt before. Later that month, something unexpected happened. I was invited to speak at a local college. The Women's Studies department had found our podcast and wanted me to do a guest lecture about coercive control in modern relationships. Standing up in front of a lecture hall full of students felt surreal. But as I spoke, telling them my story, explaining the signs, I saw faces in the crowd lighting up with recognition. Some were nodding. Some were crying. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been older than 19. She looked nervous, clutching her notebook like it was a life raft. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was crazy. That's when I knew. This was bigger than me. Bigger than Adam. This was about breaking a cycle. About giving people the language to name their pain. The months kept rolling by. The group kept growing. The podcast got picked up by a major streaming platform. But through it all, I held on to one thing. The knowledge that even though I'd been trained, conditioned, controlled, I wasn't broken. I was still here. Still standing. And now helping others stand too. One evening, while watching the sunset from my apartment window, I thought back to that first night with Adam. The party. His quiet smile. The way he'd seemed so stable. I wondered if he'd always been that way. Or if someone had trained him too once upon a time. It didn't excuse anything. But it made me think. Hurt people. And healed people? We help others heal. That's what I'd become. A healer. A helper. A survivor. And no matter how many love tests the world tried to throw my way, I wasn't taking them anymore. Because real love isn't a test. Real love is coming home to yourself. And finally, I was home. A year passed. Then two. The podcast was now in its third season. We'd built not just a show, but a full platform, online resources, virtual support groups, workshops. Melissa, Emily, and I even gave TED-style talks about coercive control and love testing. But the work wasn't what surprised me most. What surprised me was learning how to trust again. Because after Adam, I didn't think I'd ever date anyone. For a long time, just the idea of giving someone else that kind of access to my heart felt terrifying. And then I met Ryan. It wasn't dramatic or movie-like. No sweeping music, no love at first sight moment. Just two people sitting next to each other at a bookstore cafe. He noticed I was reading a book about psychological manipulation. He asked casually if it was for school. I laughed, told him it was kind of personal. I didn't even explain fully that first day. But he didn't push. Didn't ask a million questions. We talked about books. About coffee. About the weather. And over the weeks that followed, something quiet and steady started to build between us. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the little tests. But they never came. Instead, Ryan was patient. Honest. If he was upset, he said so clearly, kindly. He didn't play games. He didn't leave me waiting just to see how I'd react. One night, a few months in, I told him everything. We were sitting on my couch, the same one Lena had brought me coffee on all those months ago. I told him about Adam. About the note on the coffee table. About Melissa and Emily. About the podcast. About how scared I'd been to try this again. Ryan listened. The whole time. He didn't interrupt. Didn't look shocked or judgmental. Just listened. When I finished, I said, "So if you want to leave now, I'll understand." Ryan just shook his head slowly. "I'm not here to test you," he said. "I'm here to know you." Those words broke something loose in my chest. In a good way. For the first time in years, I let myself really breathe. Over time, my world expanded again. I started painting again. Something I'd given up during the Adam years. I reconnected with old friends I drifted from. I traveled. The group Love Isn't a Test kept growing too. We got mentions in national media outlets. People from outside the country joined our online forums. One day, I got an email from a woman in Japan who said she'd found our podcast through a Reddit thread. "It saved my life," she wrote. "It humbled me. It grounded me. It reminded me that no matter how far I'd come, there were always more people starting where I'd once been confused, scared, thinking control was the same thing as care." One afternoon, Emily sent me a link. It was an article from a local news site. Apparently, Adam had been let go from his company. The reason wasn't stated clearly, just internal HR issues. But Emily's cousin worked in that same building. Rumor was multiple women had come forward. I didn't feel glee reading it. I felt quiet. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. People needed to know. To see those patterns, recognize them. The next podcast season, we dedicated an entire arc to discussing systems of accountability, not just personal healing, but structural change. We brought in experts, lawyers, therapists, relationship coaches. And always, we made sure to end each episode with the same message. You are not alone. You are not imagining things. You deserve love that isn't a test. By the end of the year, we were hosting live events. The first one was Smala Community Center room in the middle of downtown. But over 100 people showed up. Women, men, non-binary folks, survivors of all kinds. At the event's closing circle, we invited people to share one thing they'd learned through our platform. One woman stood up, voice shaking, and said, "I learned it's okay to walk away." Another said, "I learned my worth isn't measured by how much I can endure." I stood at the front, tears in my eyes, knowing exactly how that felt. When it was my turn, I said, "I learned love doesn't need proof. It just is." The room was quiet. And then, applause. Real thunderous applause. Not for me, but for all of us. That night, sitting with Melissa and Emily afterward, we clinked our glasses together and laughed. "It's wild," Melissa said, smiling at both of us, "that we all met because of him." "Yeah," Emily agreed. "But it's not about him anymore." And she was right. Adam was just the start of the story. The real story was what came after. The real story was survival, community, growth. The real story was us. Later that night, lying in bed next to Ryan, I thought back to the journal entry I'd written years before. Dear me, I'd written. I thought about how I'd tell that version of myself now. You made it. You got out. You didn't just survive, you built something. You helped others. You learned what real love feels like. It's steady. It's kind. Lets you choose. No more tests. No more training. Just love. And freedom. Forever.